Hello to all, hope you guys are doing really good, great, or really sorry for not uploading the videos continuously due to technical issues. So let's resume with chapter 8, that is human health and disease. This is a very important chapter. So in the very first page they're telling about what is black bile and the discovery of the blood circulation by William Harvey. So then health is affected by, and then they have listed 3 points that is important. Genetic disorders are deficiencies with which a child is born, and deficiencies or defects which the child inherits from parents from birth, that is genetic disorders. So infections is the second one. Third one, lifestyle including food and water we take, rest and exercise we give to our bodies, habitats that we have or lack, etc. So the term health is very frequently used by everybody. And how do we define it? Health does not simply mean absence of any disease or physical fitness. It could be defined as a state of complete physical, mental and social well-being. When people are healthy, they are more efficient at work. This increases the productivity and as a result, it brings up the economic prosperity. Health also increases longevity of people and reduces infant and maternal mortality. Let's directly move on to the third paragraph from there because the second one is not that important. It's talking about vaccination, etc. Now, so we have a disease. Now, disease that can be broadly grouped into infections and non-infections. Diseases which can be easily transmitted from one person to another is known as infectious diseases. Infectious diseases are very common. Every one of us suffers from these at times or the other. So some of the infectious diseases are AIDS, which are even fatal, and non-infectious diseases is actually cancer, which is a major cause of drug and alcohol abuse and also affect our health adversely. So common diseases in humans, a wide range of organisms belonging to bacteria, viruses, fungi, protozoans and helminthes. So disease causing organisms are in general known as pathogens. Pathogens can enter our body by various means, multiply and interfere the damage. Pathogens have to adopt life within environment of the host. So low pH in the stomach actually helps to kill such bacteria. Now we are moving on to the very important diseases. So the very first one, Salmonella typhi, which is a pathogenic bacterium which causes typhoid fever in human beings. These pathogens generally enter the small intestine through food and water contaminated with them and migrate to other organs through blood. Sustained high fever for 39 degrees to 40 degrees Celsius, weakness, stomach pain are such symptoms. So the intestinal perforation and death may occur in severe cases. So typhoid fever can be confirmed by undergoing a Whittle test. So there is an example mentioned in the textbook that is actually about Typhoid Mary. Her original name is actually Mary Mellon. Just that she's nicknamed with Typhoid Mary. It's worth mentioning here that she was a cook by profession and was a typhoid carrier who continued to spread typhoid for several years through the food she prepared. Bacteria like Streptococcus pneumoniae and Haemophilus influenza are responsible for the disease pneumonia in humans, which infects the alveoli, which is the air-filled sacs of the lungs. As a result of this infection, the alveoli gets filled with fluid, leading to severe problems in respiration. The symptoms of pneumonia include fever, chills, cough, and headache. In severe cases, person acquires the infection by inhaling the droplets, aerosols released by the infected person, or even by sharing glasses, utensils, or anything that is being used by the person. Now, dysentery, plague, diphtheria are also among the bacterial diseases. So that is it about bacterial diseases. We learned two. That is actually Salmonella typhi and Streptococcus pneumoniae or Haemophilus influenza are the ones which comes under bacteria. Even dysentery, plague also. Now moving on to the next one, which is the virus. So common cold is a very big example of this one. So many viruses also cause diseases in humans. Rhinovirus represent one of such group of viruses which cause one of the most infectious human ailments, the common cold. That in fact the nose, respiratory passage but not the lungs. The common cold is characterized by nasal congestion and discharge, sore throat, hoarseness, cold, headache, cough and sneezes, etc. Now, this can be transmitted through contaminated objects such as pen, book, cup, doorknobs, etc. Now, some of the human diseases are caused by protozoans too. You might have heard about malaria, which is a disease which has been fighting since many years. Plasmodium is a tiny protozoan which is responsible for this disease. So Plasmodium vivax is there, Plasmodium malariae, Plasmodium falciparum are responsible for different types of malaria. Of these, malignant malaria caused by Plasmodium falciparum, which is the most serious one and can be fatal too. Now let us take a glance about what is the life cycle of Plasmodium. Plasmodium enters the human body through sporozoids. So the sporozoids actually multiply. They initially travel through the blood and they reach the liver and they multiply. Now here what happens is they attack the RBCs, resulting in the RBC rupture. The rupture of RBCs is associated with the release of a toxic substance called hemozoin, which is responsible for chill and high fever recurring every 3 to 4 days. When a female Anopheles mosquito bites an infected person, these parasites enter the mosquito body and undergo further development. The parasites multiply with them to form sporozoites when that they are stored in the salivary glands. When these mosquitoes bite a human, the sporozoites are introduced into his or her body, thereby initiating the events mentioned above. It is interesting to note that the malarial parasite requires two hosts, that is the human and the mosquito. The female Anopheles mosquito is actually a vector, which means it is a transmitting agent. Now, Entamoeba histolytica is a protozoan parasite which is present in the large intestine of human, which causes amoebiasis or amoebic dysentery. Symptoms of this disease include constipation, abdominal pain, cramped stool with excess mucus and blood clot. Houseflies act as a mechanical carriers and serve to transmit the parasite from feces of the infected person to food and the food products, thereby contaminating them. Drinking water and food contaminated by the fecal matter are the main source of infection. Ascaris, the common roundworm, and Wuchereria, the filarial worm, are some of the helminthes which are known to be pathogenic to man. Ascaris is an intestinal parasite which causes ascariasis. Symptoms of these diseases include internal bleeding, muscular pain, fever, anemia, and blockage of intestinal passage. The eggs of the parasite are excreted along the faces of infected person, which contaminate soil, water, plants, etc. A healthy person acquires this infection through contaminated water, vegetables, fruits, etc. Wuchereria malai, Wuchereria bancrofti is the filarial worms which cause a slowly developing chronic inflammation of the organs in which they live in for many years, usually the lymphatic vessels of the lower limbs, and the disease is caused during that part, which is known as elephantiasis and filariasis. The genital organs are also often infected and resulting in gross deformities. The pathogen are transmitted to a healthy person through the bite of the female and mosquito vector. Now, many fungi belonging to the genre Microsporum, Trichophytum and Epidermophytum are actually responsible for ringworms, which is one of the most common infectious diseases in man. Appearance of dry scaly lesions on various parts of the body, such as skin, nails, and scalp, are the main symptoms of the disease. These lesions are accompanied by intestine itching. Heat and moisture help these fungi to grow, which makes them thrive in skin fold, such as to loose in the groin or between the toes. Ringworms are generally acquired from soil or using the towels and clothes or a comb of an infected individual. Now in the next paragraph, nothing much is there. It is telling about the importance of maintenance of personal and public hygiene, and it can cause a lot of transmitted through food. Infectious agents are present in such kind of area. Now another important thing is that malaria and filariasis are actually transmitted through insect vectors, that is a female mosquito. Now the most important measure is to eliminate vectors and their breeding places. Another one that they're saying is about gambusia. It is actually a kind of a fish which is present in the pond that can feed on the mosquito larvae instead of spraying these insecticides in ditches. Now, vector-borne Aedes mosquito causes diseases like dengue and chikungunya in many parts of India. Now, smallpox was actually completely eradicated in almost in the 19th century. Before it seriously caused a lot of pandemic in the world. So it was actually eradicated by the use of vaccine, even polio, diphtheria, pneumonia, and tetanus also. Now, immunity. Immunity is the overall ability of the host to fight disease-causing organisms conferred by the immune system is called immunity. Now, immunity is subdivided into innate immunity and acquired immunity. Let's go into one by one. Innate immunity. Innate immunity is non-specific type of defense that is present at the time of birth. This is accomplished by providing different types of barriers the entry of the foreign agents into our body. Innate immunity consists of 4 types of barriers, that are physical barrier, physiological, cellular and cytokine. So physical barrier is actually skin. Now skin is actually considered as the first line of defense. Mucous coating of the epithelium lining, the respiratory and gastrointestinal and urogenital tract also help in trapping microbes entering our body. Physiological barriers, acid in the stomach, saliva in the mouth, tears from the eyes all prevent microbial growth. Cellular barriers is actually certain type of leukocytes, WBCs or PMNL. Now the full form of PMNL is actually polymorphonuclear leukocytes, and monocytes, which are natural killer T cells. That is a type of lymphocyte. Now in the blood, which can as well as macrophages in the tissue, and can phagocytose in the cells, destroy the cell and destroy the microbes. Now cytokine barriers are the virus infected cells which secrete protein which is known as interferons, which protect the non-infected cells from further viral infection. Let's move on to acquired immunity. Acquired immunity, on the other hand, it's actually pathogen specific. This is gained, it is the main characteristic of acquired immunity is actually memory. This means that our body, when it encounters a pathogen for the first time, it produces a response called primary response, which is of low intensity. Subsequent encounter with the same pathogen, again, it is actually highly intensified. It produces a secondary or an amnestic response. This is ascribed to the fact that our body appears to have memory in the first encounter, so it knows how to react to it. Now, the primary and secondary immune responses are carried out with the help of 2 special types of lymphocytes present in the blood, that is the B lymphocyte and the T lymphocyte. Now, the B lymphocyte produces an army of proteins in response to the pathogens into our blood to fight with them. These proteins are called the antibodies. So, the very first, in the primary response itself, antibodies are being released, which are actually proteins, and these antibodies are actually subdivided into B and T. So the T cells themselves do not secrete antibodies, but they produce with the help of B cells. That is very important. So the T cells themselves do not secrete antibodies, but the B cells secrete or produce with them. Now, each of the antibody molecule has 4 peptide chains, which is 2 light chains and 2 heavy chains, that is H2L2. Now, there are different types of antibodies such as IgA, IgM, IgE and IgG, which are some of them. A cartoon of an antibody is given in figures of 8.4. Now, these antibodies are found in the blood, and their response is also called as humoral immune responses. This is one of the 2 types of an acquired immune response, antibody mediated one. Now, the second type is actually cell mediated immunity, or the CMI, which the T lymphocytes mediate this cell mediated immune response. Very often when some humans or human organs like heart, eye, liver, kidney fail to function satisfactorily, transplantation is the only memory. Now here what happens is that another mechanism takes place. Now our body has this a very beautiful feature of recognizing what is ours and what is a foreigner in the body. So this feature is telling about what happens during graft is that cannot be, graft is from just any source, an animal, another primate or a human beings cannot be made, since the grafts would be rejected sooner or later. Now, tissue matching, blood group matching are essential before undertaking any graft transplant, and even after this, the patient has to take immunosuppressant all his or her life. The body is able to differentiate self and non-self, that's what I told. And cell-mediated immune response is responsible for this graft rejection. That is an important one. Cell-mediated immunity is responsible. Now let's move on to active immunity and passive immunity. Now active immunity is actually which may be in the form of living or dead microorganisms or another proteins, antibodies which are produced in the host in the body. This type of immunity is called active immunity, where when the host is actually exposed to such antigens, it naturally produces. Now, active immunity is slow and takes time to give full effective response. Injecting microbes deliberately during immunization or infectious organisms, it gives immunity. It induces active immunity. When ready-made antibodies are directly used to protect the body against foreign agents, that is actually known as passive immunity. And one such example is colostrum, which is the yellowish fluid secreted by the mother during the initial days of lactation and has abundant antibodies IgA to protect the infant. Now, the fetus also receives some antibodies from the mother through placenta during pregnancy, and the examples are passive immunity. Now, vaccination and immunization. Vaccination is actually the principle of immunization. Vaccination is the principle of memory, property of memory of the immune system. In vaccination, a preparation of antigenic proteins of pathogen or inactivated or weakened pathogen is actually called vaccine. Generally, vaccine is termed as the dead or the weakened form of any microbe is actually known as vaccination. Vaccines also generate B and T cells that recognize the pathogen quickly on subsequent exposure and overwhelm the invaders with massive production of antibodies. Now, tetanus, what happens in tetanus is that we need to directly inject the perform antibodies and antitoxin, which is a preparation containing antibodies to the toxin. Even in cases of snake bites, injection which is given to the patients contain a performed antibody against the snake venom. This type of immunization is called passive immunization. Now, recombinant DNA technology has also allowed the production of antigenic polypeptides of pathogen in bacteria or yeast. Vaccine produced using for immunization like hepatitis B vaccine is produced from the yeast. Now, let's move on to allergy. The exaggerated response of the immune system to certain antigens present in the environment is called allergy. Now, the substance to which an immune response is produced is called allergens. Now, allergens are actually produced due to IgE type. Common examples of allergy might be dust of pollen, animal dander, etc. Symptoms is actually sneezing, watery eyes, running nose, difficulty in breathing, sneezing and wheezing also. Now, allergy is it happens due to the release of histamine and serotonin and from the mast cell. For determining the cause of allergy, the patient is exposed to injected with very small dosage of possible allergens like antihistamine, adrenaline and steroids to quickly reduce the symptom of allergy. That is it. Let's move on to autoimmunity. Now, memory based on the acquired immunity involved in higher vertebrates based on the ability to differentiate foreign organisms from self and the non-self cells. Then when it comes to the last third line, sometimes due to genetic and other unknown reasons, body attacks the self cell. This result in damage of the body is called autoimmune disease. One such example is rheumatoid arthritis, which is actually an autoimmune disease. That is the only one mentioned here. Now, the immune system in the body consists of lymphoid organs, tissue cells, and soluble molecules like antibodies. Now, lymphoid organs, they are organs which origin and mutation or proliferation of lymphocytes occur. Now, the primary lymphoid organ is actually the bone marrow and the thymus. Then, the premature lymphocytes differentiate and proliferate. A lymphocyte occur in the bone thymus or the bone marrow and the thymus. Now, the primary lymphoid organ are the bone marrow and thymus, which are immature. Lymphocytes differentiate into anti-sensitive, that is antigen sensitive lymphocyte. After maturation, the lymphocytes migrate to secondary lymphoid organs like spleen, lymph nodes, tonsils. Now, Peever's patches it is actually present in intestine and the appendix. Now, the secondary lymphoid organ provide the site of interaction of lymphocytes with the antigen, which then proliferate to become effector cells. The location of various lymphoid organs in the human body is shown in figure 8.5, as you can see. So, first is the lymph node, then comes the thymus, then comes the lymphatic vessels. Now, the bone marrow is the main lymphoid organ where all the blood cells, including lymphocytes, are produced. The thymus is a lobe organ between the heart and beneath the breastbone. The thymus is quite large at the time of birth, but it keeps on reducing, and when it reaches about 13 years, it just disappears. So here what happens is, See, both bone marrow and thymus provide micro environment for development and maturation of T lymphocytes. The spleen is very large bean-shaped organ and it mainly contains lymphocytes and phagocytes. It acts as a filter of the blood by trapping blood-borne microorganisms. Spleen also have a large reservoir of erythrocytes. The lymph nodes are small solid structures located in each and every one. Now, antigens trapped on the lymph nodes are responsible for the activation of the lymphocytes present and cause immune response. Now, lymphoid tissue is also located within the lining of the major tract like respiratory, digestive and urogenital tract. Called mucosal associated lymphoid tissue is present in the respiratory, digestive and urogenital tract. Another one important line is that MALT, that is mucosal associated lymphoid tissue, constitutes about 50% of the lymphoid tissue in the human body. Now, AIDS. So the AIDS stands for Acquired Immunodeficiency Syndrome. Now, AIDS was first reported in 1981. It was actually considered as a syndrome, which means a group of symptoms. And in the last 25 years or so. So it has spread all over the world, killing more than 25 million people. Now, AIDS is caused by human immunodeficiency virus, that is HIV, which is the member of a group of virus of retrovirus, which have enveloped enclosing the RNA genome. Now, transmission of the HIV virus usually generally occurs through the sexual contact with the infected person, by the transfusion of contaminated blood and blood product, by sharing the infected needles in case of intravenous drug abusers, and also from sexual partners. Now, see, it is hence you need to understand that it only spreads through body fluid. HIV and AIDS infected person are not isolated from the family and society. That is nothing much is there. Now, another important is that for the symptoms to appear, it takes almost 5 to 10 years of time. Now, after getting into the body of the person, the virus first enters into the macrophages, where RNA genome of the virus replicates to form the viral DNA with the help of enzyme reverse transcriptase. Now, the viral DNA gets incorporated into the host cell DNA and directs the infected cells to produce virus particles. The macrophages continue to produce virus in a way that HIV factory. Simultaneously, HIV enters into the helper T lymphocytes, replicates and produce progeny virus. The progeny virus is released from the blood, attack the helper T lymphocytes. This is repeated, leading into progressive decrease in the number of helper T lymphocytes in the body of the infected person. Now, during this period, the person suffers from fever, diarrhea, weight loss, etc. due to decrease that have been otherwise overcome, such that due to bacteria, especially Mycobacterium viruses, even parasites like Toxoplasma. Now, patient becomes immunodeficient, that he or she is unable to protect herself from other against infections. Now, this can be identified by the test in enzyme-linked immunosorbent assay. Now, prevention of AIDS is actually, AIDS generally has no cure. Prevention is the best option than cure. So, we have an organization, that is National AIDS Control Organization, called NACO, and other non-governmental NGOs in order to control. So, the NACO's full form is important, that is National AIDS Control Organization. Let's move on to cancer. Cancer is one of the non-infectious diseases, that is of the human beings, and it is a major cause of death all over the world. Now, cancer can be either cancerous or oncogenic transformation of cells can take place. What happens is the breakdown of the regulatory mechanisms, that is normal cells show a property called contact inhibition, by virtue of which contact with other cells inhibits their uncontrolled growth. Cancer cells appear to have lost this property. As a result of this, cancerous cells just continue to divide continuously. As a result, a mass of cell is being formed by there. That is known as tumor. Now, tumors can be of two types. That is benignant tumor. That means they divide and they multiply a lot, but they restrained to that particular location only. But whereas malignant tumor, what happens here is that it actually spreads to further mass. That means it is actually a proliferating cells, that is also known as neoplastic or tumor cells. Now, cells logged from each such tumors reach the distant sites through blood, and wherever they get logged in the body, they start a new tumor there. This property is called metastasis, which is one of the feared property of malignant tumor. So, which means that, see, it is actually passed through the blood, and if they get stuck between anywhere in the body while flowing, what happens is they start a new tumor there by dividing, multiplying a lot. Such kind of a feature is known as metastasis. Now, the causes of cancer is actually transformation of the normal cells into cancerous neoplastic cells, which may induce physical, chemical, or biological agent. These agents are called carcinogens. Now, ionizing radiations like X-ray, gamma ray, and non-ionizing radiations like UV cause DNA damage, leading to neoplastic transformation. The chemical carcinogen present in tobacco smoke have been identified as a major cause of lung cancer. Cancer-causing viruses called oncogenic viruses have genes called viral oncogenes. Further, several genes called cellular oncogenes and proto-oncogenes which have been identified. Now, cancer detection and diagnosis. One example is actually detection is based on biopsy and histopathological studies of the tissue in case of leukemias, etc. Now, biopsy is actually a piece of the tissue is taken and they under the microscope they do a lot of tests. Now, another technique is like radiography, X-ray, CT, computed tomography, and MRI, magnetic response imaging, which is very helpful to identify. Now, antibodies against cancer-specific antigens are also used for the detection of certain cancers. Techniques of molecular biology can also be used in a particular carcinogen. Now, treatment of cancer, surgery, radiation therapy, immunotherapy are the three main types. Now, at the very end, it is written that the patients are given substances called biological response modifiers, which is known as alpha interferon, which activates their immune system and helps them destroy the tumor. Drugs and alcohol abuse. Very first one, they talk about opioid, which is actually the drug which bind to specific opioid receptors present in our central nervous system and gastrointestinal tract. Now, the heroin, which is commonly known as smack, which is chemically known as diacetyl morphine, which is formed by the acetylation of morphine, which is extracted by the latex of the poppy plant Papaver somniferum, generally taken by snorting and injection. Now, heroin is also a depression. What happens is depressant, which slows down the body functions. Now, cannabinoids are a group of chemicals which interact with cannabinoid receptors present participatively in the brain. So, natural cannabinoids are obtained by the inflorescence of cannabis sativa, the flower tops of marijuana. They produce marijuana, hashish, kara, and ganja, generally taken by the inhalation or oral ingestion also. And what happens is it affects the cardiovascular system of the body. Now, coca alkaloid or cocaine is obtained from the coca plant Erythroxylum coca, which is native to South America, which interferes in the transport of neurotransmitter dopamine. Now, cocaine is commonly known as coke or crack, which is usually snorted, and it has a potent to stimulate the nervous system. It causes a sense of euphoria and increased energy, and causes excessive dosage causes hallucinations. Another well-known plant with hallucinogenic property is Atropa, belladonna, and datura. Now, there are drugs like barbiturates, lysergic acid, and diethyl with and other similar drugs that are normally used as medicines to help patients cope with mental illness like depression, insomnia, and morphine is actually a very sedative agent that is used during surgery. Now, moving on to the next page, it tells about smoking. Tobacco has been used by human beings for more than 400 years. It is smoked, chewed, and even snuffed. Tobacco contains a large number of chemical substances including nicotine and alkaloid. Nicotine stimulates the adrenal gland to release adrenaline and non-adrenaline into the blood circulation, both of which raise blood pressure and increase heart rate. Smoking is associated with the increased incidence of cancer of lung, urinary bladder and throat bronchitis, emphysema, coronary heart disease, gastric ulcer, etc. Now, tobacco chewing is associated with the risk of cancer in the oral cavity, that is the lung. Now, smoking increases the level of carbon monoxide in the blood and reduces the concentration of the hem bound in oxygen, that is actually the hemoglobin and oxygen bond. Now this causes deficiency of oxygen in our body. Now adolescence and drug alcohol abuse, nothing much is there. You need to remember about this withdrawal symptoms. So here what happens is, when there is an addiction towards alcohol or a drug, once it is stopped, there is a kind of symptoms which is being produced, like anxiety, shakiness, nausea, sweating, etc. These symptoms, a group of symptoms together make the syndrome. So these symptoms together makes withdrawal syndrome. Now that is it. Now effective alcohol and drug abuse, as you all know, there will be a lot of problems like AIDS, HIV infections, chronic infections, etc. Now long-term effects are also there. Now consuming alcohol for a longer period of time causes liver cirrhosis, and also and that is it. Now prevention and control, avoid the usage of drugs and alcohol under peer pressure, education and counseling, seeking help from parents and friends, looking for danger signs, and seeking prevention and medical help. So that is it with chapter human health and disease. Hope you guys liked it. Please stay tuned for more, and if you have any concerns regarding anything, please do comment down below, and do like, share and subscribe. So until then, God bless you all. Stay home and stay safe.